He walked into the courtroom like it was a red carpet event, fingers interlaced with his mistress and a smile that claimed premature victory. I sat quietly, with a hand on my 8-month pregnant belly, appearing defeated. Yet no one knew the sealed envelope on the judge's bench contained more than just genetics. It held the lock to an entire empire, and the wealthiest man in the room was seconds away from losing every single thing that mattered. My name is Elise Marquette. I was 36 years old, 8 months pregnant, and currently sitting on the edge of an examination table that smelled of antiseptic and cold indifference. The paper gown crinkled with every shallow breath I took, a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet room at Harbor View Women's Center. Outside the window, Boston was locked in the gray iron grip of a February morning, the kind of cold that seeped through the glass and settled into your bones. Evans, a woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, frowned at the monitor. She moved the ultrasound wand with a hesitation that made my stomach knot. "I need to keep you here for monitoring, Elise," she said softly. "Your blood pressure is spiking, and there are signs of distress that I am not comfortable ignoring." Before I could ask if my baby was safe, the door swung open. It did not open tentatively. It was shoved inward with the entitlement of a man who owned every room he walked into. My husband, Graham Wycliffe, stood there. He was dressed in a charcoal bespoke suit that cost more than the annual salary of the nurse checking my vitals. He did not look at me. He looked at his watch. His expression was not one of concern for the wife carrying his heir, but of a CEO whose schedule had been inconveniently disrupted by a minor operational failure. "How long is this going to take?" Graham asked, his voice crisp. "I have the board meeting for the merger in 45 minutes. Dr. Evans turned her professionalism straining against visible dislike. "Mr. Whitecliffe, your wife's condition requires—" "My wife is fine." Graham cut her off, finally glancing at me with a look that was less about affection and more about appraisal. "She is always dramatic near the finish line. Aren't you, Elise?" I opened my mouth to defend myself, to tell him about the cramping that had kept me awake since 4 in the morning, but his phone buzzed. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration against the metal surface of the instrument tray where he had carelessly tossed it. The screen lit up. I was close enough to read the name, Sloane Carrion. The name hit me harder than the physical pain in my abdomen. Sloane, his publicist, the woman who had been lingering at the edge of our marriage like a vulture waiting for something to die. I looked at Graham, and for a split second his mask slipped. He grabbed the phone, his knuckles whitening, and looked at me with pure, unadulterated venom. It was as if I was the one who had committed the sin of seeing the truth. "We are done here," Graham announced. He reached out and gripped my upper arm. His fingers dug into the soft flesh, painful and possessive. "Get dressed. You can rest in the car. Mr. W. Cliff, I cannot discharge her." "Dr." Evans protested, stepping forward. Graham ignored her. He pulled me off the table. My legs felt heavy, swollen, and useless. I stumbled, clutching the papered gown to my chest to cover my dignity. He dragged me out of the examination room and into the bright, sterile hallway lined with other expected mothers and their partners. "You are embarrassing me," he hissed into my ear, his breath smelling of mint and expensive coffee. "Sloane is handling the press release for the acquisition, and because of your little health scare, I am missing the briefing call." "Graham, please," I whispered, trying to find my footing on the polished linoleum. A sharp pain radiated through my lower back, stealing my breath. I stopped, instinctively clutching my belly. "I am bleeding. I saw it this morning. I am bleeding." "Graham!" He stopped. The hallway went quiet. He looked down at me, and I expected to see fear. I expected to see the man I had married 7 years ago, the man who had promised to protect me. Instead, I saw a sneer. "You are pathetic," he said, and then he moved. It was a blur of motion. His hand came up and struck me across the face. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet corridor. It was a sharp, wet crack that seemed to echo off the walls. My head snapped to the side. The sting on my cheek was instantaneous, burning hot against the cold air of the hospital. I stumbled back, catching myself against the wall, my hand flying to my face. Silence. Absolute terrified silence. Every nurse, every doctor, every patient in that hallway froze. They stared at the billionaire, The philanthropist, the man on the cover of Forbes, standing over his pregnant wife with his hand still raised. A security guard at the end of the hall started running toward us, his radio crackling. I looked at Graham. I looked at the man who had shared my bed, who had built a life with me. And in that moment, the illusion shattered. This was not a mistake. This was not stress. This was not a one-time lapse in judgment. This was him. This was the violence he had kept hidden behind closed doors and psychological games, finally spilling out into the light. He straightened his jacket. He smoothed his tie. He looked at the rushing security guard and then back at me with eyes as dead as stones. "Do not call me," he said, his voice loud enough for the stunned audience to hear. "Do not call me unless you are dying. I have a company to run." He turned and walked away. He did not run. He did not look back. He walked with the rhythmic, confident stride of a man who believed consequences were things that happened to other people, poor people. I watched him go, and for the first time in 7 years, I did not see a titan of industry. I saw a small, cruel man, a man so terrified of losing control that he had to strike a woman carrying his child to feel powerful. The security guard reached me, his hands hovering, afraid to touch me. Ma'am, are you okay?" I slid down the wall, the floor cold against my legs. "I need a doctor," I whispered. "They kept me overnight." They hooked me up to monitors that beeped with the steady, reassuring rhythm of my baby's heartbeat, a sound that contrasted sharply with the chaotic shattering of my life. The nurses were kind, but their kindness was laced with pity. I hated it. I hated the way they looked at the red mark fading on my cheek. Around 2:00 in the morning, the hospital was quiet. The only light came from the glow of the city outside and the blinking LEDs of the medical equipment. I could not sleep. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, cold and sharp. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My hands were shaking, but my mind was possessed by a sudden icy clarity. I opened the banking app for our joint account. Graham was meticulous with money, but he was arrogant. He assumed I never looked at the details because I never asked for anything. I scrolled through the transactions. The numbers blurred until one stood out. A transfer made just 3 hours ago, $50,000. The recipient was a legal firm I recognize, not his corporate lawyers, not the firm that handled the family trust. This was a firm known for aggressive scorched earth litigation. The label on the transaction read "Legal Consulting $50,000 from our marital funds transferred hours after he slapped me in public." I sat up, ignoring the protest of my sore muscles. I reached for my laptop, which I had brought in my bag for work. I logged into the family cloud account. We shared it for photos, for tax documents, for the mundane administration of a life together. He had probably forgotten I had access. Or maybe he just didn't care. I went to the email drafts. Graham often dictated emails to his assistant and saved them there for review. There was one draft saved at 7 in the evening titled "Emergency Petition Guardianship and Paternity." My breath hitched. I clicked it open. The text was dry, legal, and terrifying. It was a draft instruction to his lawyer. Objective immediate temporary guardianship of Elise Marquette W. Lift due to severe prenatal psychological instability. Requesting full medical power of attorney. Secondary objective, contest paternity pending DNA verification to halt any trust distribution. I read it twice, then 3 times. He wasn't just planning to divorce me. He was planning to erase me. He was going to use my emotional reaction to his abuse, the instability, to declare me unfit. He wanted to take control of my medical decisions while I was in labor and the paternity. He was going to claim the baby wasn't his, to freeze the assets. He wanted to lock me in a cage of his own making, take my child, and leave me with nothing but a diagnosis of insanity. I closed the laptop. The room felt suddenly very small, like a coffin. Panic tried to claw its way up my throat, but I swallowed it down. Panic was a luxury I could no longer afford. Panic was what Graham wanted. I picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over the contacts. I had not asked my father for help in 10 years. Harlan Marquette was a hard man. He ran the Marquette Freight Consortium like a military operation. He had disapproved of Graham from the start, calling him a shiny object with no foundation. I had chosen love, or what I thought was love, over my father's approval. We had been polite strangers for a decade. But Graham had made a mistake. He thought he was fighting the lonely, dependent wife. He forgot whose blood ran in my veins. He forgot that before I was a Wycliffe, I was a Marquette. I dialed the number. It rang once. Elise. His voice was gruff, awake despite the hour. He was always awake. "Dad," I said. My voice did not shake. "I need you, and I need silence." There was a pause on the other end, a heavy, pregnant pause. I could hear the faint sound of a page turning, the scratch of a pen. Arlon Marquette did not ask why I was calling at 2:00 in the morning. He did not ask why my voice sounded like dead leaves scraping on pavement. He did not ask about the husband he despised. "Send me your location," Harlan said. Right now I exhaled, and for the first time in 12 hours, oxygen actually reached my lungs. "I am sending it," I said. "Good," he replied. "Sit tight. The cavalry is coming." The line went dead. I looked at the phone, then out the window at the frozen Boston skyline. The tears I had been holding back since the slap did not fall. Instead, a cold resolve settled in my chest, right next to the beating heart of my unborn child. Graham thought the war had started when he hit me. He was wrong. The war started now. The morning sun hitting the brick facade of our Beacon Hill townhouse did not look welcoming. It looked like the glare of an interrogation lamp. I stepped out of my father's town car, my hand resting instinctively on my belly, and looked up at the 4 stories of curated perfection that I had called home for 7 years. It was beautiful, historic, and utterly hollow. It was no longer a home. It was a cage with crown molding. My father, Harlan, had wanted to send a security team in with me, but I had refused. Graham was at the office. If I wanted to survive this, I needed information, and I could not get it if I stormed in with a battering ram. I had to walk in like a wife returning from the hospital. Shaken but compliant, I unlocked the front door. The silence inside was heavy. It smelled of lemon polish and stale leaves from the arrangement on the foyer table. I walked straight past the living room where we had hosted Christmas parties that made the society pages and went into Graham's study. He was a man of habits. He believed he was untouchable and that arrogance made him sloppy. He assumed I was too emotional, too artistic to understand the logistics of his life. He left his personal iPad on the mahogany desk charging. I sat in his leather chair, the leather cold against my legs through my maternity dress. My fingers hovered over the screen. Passcode. He had not changed it. It was still the date of the day he took his company public. Not our anniversary, not my birthday. The day he became a billionaire. I typed in the numbers. The screen unlocked. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the baby. I went straight to the messages. There was a pinned conversation at the top. The contact name was just S.K. Sloan Carrion. I scrolled back to yesterday morning, right around the time he was slapping me in the hospital hallway. "Graham, she is staying overnight for observation. It is a nuisance." "Sloan, does she suspect anything regarding the filing?" "Graham, she thinks I am just stressed about the merger. She has no idea about the petition. We are on schedule for the hearing next week." I read the words, but my brain refused to process the malice behind them. I scrolled down to a message sent at 6 this morning. "Sloan, are you sure the judge will grant the emergency order?" "Graham, don't worry. I got the DNA report this morning. It is bulletproof. She has no chance. Once that is submitted, she loses all credibility. She will be lucky if she gets supervised visitation." I put the iPad down on the desk because my hands were shaking so violently. I thought I might drop it. DNA report. What DNA report? There was no question about paternity. There never had been. We had gone through IVF. We had doctors' logs and biological certainties. Why would he need a DNA report to ensure I lost credibility? I took my phone out and started photographing the screen. I did not forward the messages. That would leave a digital footprint he could trace. I took photos of every text, every time. Then I opened his calendar. Between the board meetings and merger calls, there were 2 appointments hidden in plain sight, marked as private. I tapped on one for tomorrow afternoon. Location, Jen, Sure, Private Lab, Cambridge. I tapped on another one from 3 days ago. Meeting with Tane, Crisis Media Consultant. He was not just leaving me. He was orchestrating a demolition. He was hiring crisis management to spin the narrative of his pregnant wife's breakdown before it even happened. I needed help. I needed someone who knew how to fight in the mud without getting dirty. I dialed Meyer de Leon. Meyer and I had gone to college together before she became one of the most feared divorce attorneys in Boston. We had drifted apart as I sank deeper into Graham's world of charity galas and silence. But she had never deleted my number. Elise, her voice was sharp, professional. Meyer, I said, my voice cracking. I need you to listen to me for 2 minutes, and I need you to tell me if I'm crazy. I told her everything. The slap, the hospital, the draft email about guardianship, the texts about the DNA report. There was a silence on the line. Then the sound of a chair scraping back. Stop talking, Meyer said. Her voice had shifted. It was no longer the voice of a friend. It was the voice of a general. Are you safe right now? I am at the townhouse. He is at work. Good. Listen to me, Elise. Do not cry. Tears are for the funeral, and we are not burying you today. Start documenting. I want you to photograph everything. Bank statements, tax returns, passwords. If there is a safe, open it. If there is a backup hard drive, take it. He said he has a DNA report. I whispered Meyer. He said, I have no chance. We will get to that, Meyer said, her tone hard. Rule number 1. You do not confront him. You are the dutiful, traumatized wife. You play dead until we have the knife in our hand. I am sending you a contact for a private investigator. His name is Reed Callahan. Call him immediately. Akpai. Graham is not playing by family court rules. Elise, he's playing by corporate raid rules. You need intel. I hung up and called the number Meyer texted me. Reed Callahan answered on the second ring. He did not sound like a television detective. He sounded like a man who was tired of human nature. Callahan, Mr. Callahan, my name is Elise Wycliffe. Meyer de Leon told me to call. I charge $300 an hour plus expenses, he said flatly, and I need $5,000 retainer upfront. Cash or crypto. No credit cards that your husband can trace. I can get the cash, I said. I need to know what my husband is doing, and I need to know who he is doing it with. Listen to me, Mrs. W. Cliff, Reed said, his voice dropping an octave. I used to investigate insurance fraud. I know your husband's type. He is used to buying reality. If I take this job, you have to be prepared for what I find. The wealthy do not just have affairs. They build parallel lives. They play very dirty because they can afford the cleanup. Are you sure you want to look under this rock? He hit me, I said, the memory of the slap stinging my cheek. I want to burn the rock down. All right, Reed said. I am on it. I spent the next 3 hours raiding my own life. I copied files onto an external hard drive I found in Graham's drawer. I took photos of his passport, his social security card, the deed to the house. I felt like a thief in my own marriage. By the time Graham came home that evening, I was sitting on the sofa reading a book on infant care. He barely looked at me. He went straight to the shower, then to the guest room. He was already detaching, already living in a world where I did not exist. The next morning, while Graham was at his breakfast meeting, my burner phone buzzed. It was red. Check your secure email. I sent a link. I locked the bathroom door and sat on the edge of the tub. I opened the link. There were photos, high resolution, taken with a long-range lens. The first few were standard cliches of betrayal. Graham and Sloane entering the Four Seasons in Back Bay. Graham's hand on the small of her back. The look on his face, not love but possession. It hurt, but it was a dull ache. I had expected this. Then I scrolled to the next set of images. Reed had followed Sloane after she left the hotel. She was not shopping. She was not at a spa. She was walking out of a medical building on Boylston Street. The sign above the door was clear in the telephoto shot, North Quill Fertility Institute. I zoomed in. Sloane was holding a folder. She was smiling. My breath caught in my throat. North Quill. That was where Graham and I had done our IVF cycle 2 years ago. That was where our embryos were stored. Why was his mistress at our fertility clinic? My phone rang. It was Meyer. Did you see what Reed sent? She asked without preamble. Why is she there? Meyer, I asked, my voice rising. Why is she at my clinic? I don't know yet, Mears said. But I'd have been analyzing that draft email you found, the petition for guardianship. He wants to say I am crazy. I said he wants to take the baby. It is worse than that. Myers said. I pulled the statutes he is referencing. Graham is running a dual strategy. Strategy is the guardianship by claiming you are mentally unstable and a danger to the fetus. He gets temporary medical power of attorney that lets him control the birth. It lets him control you. I gripped the phone tighter. And strategy B? Strategy B is the DNA, Myers said grimly. If he can prove or even fabricate proof that the child is not his, he voids the prenup's fidelity clause. But more importantly, under the W. Cliff family trust, only biological heirs can trigger the dispersal of the grandfather's assets. If he claims you cheated and the baby is a bastard, he cuts you off financially. But here is the twisted part, Elise. If he proves the baby isn't his, why is he fighting so hard for guardianship? I stared at the tile floor. The pieces were floating in my head, sharp and dangerous. He wants the baby, I said slowly. But he wants the baby without me. Exactly, Myers said. He wants to be the sole parent. He wants to be the savior who rescued the heir from the crazy cheating mother. It creates a perfect narrative for his investors, the tragic single father. But the baby is his, I insisted. We did IVF. It is impossible for it not to be his. Unless, Myers said, and the word hung in the air like smoke. Unless the DNA report he mentioned to Sloan says something else. How can a report say something else if it is a lie? Money buys a lot of things. Elise, including science. Look, we need to meet. Not on the phone. Tonight, 7:00 where? There is a diner in Somerville called the Red Booth. It is dirty. The coffee is terrible. And nobody, will ever set foot there. We need to figure out where he is getting this DNA report, and we need to figure out why Sloan Carrion is walking out of your fertility clinic with a smile on her face. I will be there, I said. I hung up. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked pale, tired, and terrified. But behind the fear, there was something else, a cold, hard anger. Graham thought he was writing the story of my destruction. He thought he was the director, the editor, and the audience. He had no idea I had just started reading the script. The Red Booth in Somerville smelled of burnt coffee and old fryer grease, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic scent of my life in Beacon Hill. It was the kind of place where people went to be forgotten, which made it the perfect war room for a woman whose husband was trying to erase her. I slid into the cracked, red vinyl booth opposite Meyer de Leon. The fluorescent light above us flickered with a maddening buzz, casting long, sickly shadows across the table. Meyer did not waste time with pleasantries. She pushed a file across the sticky table. Beside her, Reed Callahan sat nursing a black coffee, looking like he had not slept in a week. We have a theory, Meyer said, her voice low enough to be lost under the clatter of silverware from the kitchen. And if we are right, Graham is not just divorcing you, he is dismantling you. Tell me, I said. My hands were resting on my stomach, a protective reflex I could not stop. Graham is obsessed with the Illiff family trust, Meyer said. We know that, but the trust has a morality clause and a strict lineage requirement. To access the principle, the heir must be of the blood and in good moral standing. If Graham can prove you were unfaithful, he paints himself as the victim to the board. But if he proves the child is not his, he does two things. First, he voids your prenuptial protections. Second, he ensures you have no claim on the family fortune through the child. But the child is his, I insisted, the frustration rising in my throat like bile. We did IVF. There is no other possibility. Reed cleared his throat. He tapped a photo in the file. It was a grainy shot of a nondescript brick building in Cambridge. This is Jen's Shore private lab. Reed said, it is a boutique facility. They do not cater to the public. They cater to clients who need specific results. I dug into their reputation. They are known for their flexibility. If you pay enough, positive becomes negative. Negative becomes positive. It is science for the highest bidder. I stared at the photo. So, he paid them to fake a paternity test. It is cleaner than a bribe. Reed said he supplies a sample that he knows will fail, or he supplies a sample from someone else entirely to match against the fetus. But to make that stick in court, he needs a plausible reason to question the paternity in the first place. The if, I whispered. The memory washed over me, cold and sterile. 2 years ago, the North Quill Fertility Institute, Graham had been the one to push for it. He had sat me down in our living room, holding my hands, his face a mask of sorrow. He told me his counts were low. He told me he had motility issues. He told me that natural conception was a statistical impossibility. I had believed him. I had injected myself with hormones, endured the bruising, the mood swings, the invasive procedures, all because I wanted to give us a family. Reed found something else, Meyer said, pulling me back to the present. He tracked down an employee from North Quill, a former embryologist named Kara Voss. Former, she was fired 6 months ago, Reed said officially for procedural errors. Unofficially, she started asking questions about the VIP logs. She is terrified, Mrs. W. Cliff, but she agreed to meet us. She says she remembers your cycle. Where? I asked. Parking structure of the E-Wife station. Reed said, top level 40 minutes from now. The drive to E-Wife was silent. The rain had started to fall, slicking the streets of Boston with a black sheen. The parking structure was a cavern of gray concrete and echoing tires. We drove to the top level where the wind whipped through the open sides carrying the smell of exhaust and winter decay. A lone figure stood near the edge, huddled in a thick coat. Reed stopped the car. I will stay here, he said. You go. She needs to see you. She needs to see she is helping a human being, not just a case file. I stepped out into the cold. The wind bit through my coat. I walked toward the woman. Kara Voss looked young, perhaps late 20s, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that she kept buried deep in her pockets. She flinched when I approached. Mrs. Wycliffe, she asked. Her voice was thin, snatched away by the wind. Yes, I said. Thank you for coming. I shouldn't be here, she said, looking over her shoulder at the ramp. They have lawyers. They have people who watch. Huh, I asked. Graham, the Institute, she said. Graham W. Cliff is a donor to the hospital wing. He is a god there. She shivered, turning back to me. I remember your file because it was flagged. Priority handling. That means the senior director handles the samples personally. Junior staff are not supposed to touch them, but you did. I was on the night shift, Kara said. The alarm on the cryotent triggered a false warning. I had to check the inventory manually. I pulled the canister for your cycle. The date matched. Your name matched. She stopped. She looked at my stomach, then up at my eyes. The fear in her gaze was palpable, and I pressed. The sperm sample, she said. The vial label. It had been relabeled. I could see the edge of the sticker underneath. I was curious. I should not have looked, but I did. I peeled back the corner. Was it not Graham's name? It didn't have a name, Carrara said. It had a donor code. In our system, every donor has a unique alphanumeric ID. Your husband's ID ends in W49, but the vial that was used to fertilize your eggs, the code on the sticker underneath, ended in VW1. I frowned. The W? What does that mean? I looked it up in the archive, Kara said. It is a legacy code, one of the oldest in the database. It belongs to a depositor from 30 years ago. The account is still active, paying storage fees annually. Whom is it? I asked, though a cold dread was already pooling in my stomach. Kara took a step back. The name on the VW01 account is Victor Wycliffe. The name hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, grabbing the concrete railing for support. Victor Wycliffe, Graham's father, the patriarch, the man who lived in a fortress in the Hamptons and had not spoken to Graham in 5 years, the man who controlled the empire, the man I had met exactly once at our wedding, where he had looked at me with cold, shark-like eyes and said nothing. That is impossible, I said. Victor is 70 years old. He has nothing to do with us. The sample was frozen 30 years ago. Kara whispered. It was high quality, extremely high viability. Unlike she hesitated. Unlike the fresh samples your husband provided during the initial testing, Mrs. Wycliffe, Your husband's samples showed zero count, complete aospermia. He could never have fathered a child naturally or even with standard IVF. My world tilted. Graham had lied about low motility. He was sterile, completely sterile. And instead of telling me, instead of using a donor, he had used his father's frozen sperm. 5. The answer came to me with a clarity that was terrifying. The trust, the heir clause to inherit the White Cliff Empire, the child had to be of the blood. If Graham used a random donor, the child would be illegitimate in the eyes of the trust. But if he used Victor's sperm, the child would be a Wycliffe. Biologically, the child would be Graham's half-sibling, but legally, he could pass it off as his own heir. But now, he was using that same secret to destroy me. He was going to use the DNA test to show the baby wasn't his, which was technically true, to claim I cheated. He would bury the truth that the real father was his own father. He switched them, I said, my voice shaking. He used his father to make the baby, and now he is using the lack of his own DNA to destroy me. He is dangerous, Carr said. If this gets out, the medical board will burn the institute down. But Graham, he will do worse. Will you testify? I asked. Will you say this to a judge? Carr looked terrified. I don't know. I signed an NDA. They threatened my license. We will protect you, I said. I promise. I walked back to the car. My legs felt numb. I got in and the warmth of the heater felt alien against my frozen skin. Well, Meyer asked from the back seat. It is Victor, I said. The biological father is Victor Wycliffe. Meyer swore softly. Ray just whistled a low impressed sound. That is the leverage, Mears said, her eyes snapping with intensity. That is the nuclear bomb. If Graham admits the baby isn't his, he has to explain whose it is. If he admits it is Victor's, he admits to medical fraud and unauthorized use of genetic material. He is trapped. We need the records. I said, we need proof of the switch. I will draft the subpoena tonight. Meyer said, we are going to request a chain of custody prenatal test. Court ordered, not Jen Shore, and we are going to subpoena the donor logs for code VW01. We drove out of the structure, merging back into the wet, dark traffic of the city. I looked out the window, watching the lights blur. I felt sick. My innocent child was a pawn in a game of succession that spanned generations. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was not a number I recognized. It was a burner number. I opened the message. Don't dig into the IVF. You will lose everything. This is your only warning. I held the phone up for Meyer to see. She read it, and a slow, sharp smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator who had just smelt blood. Good, Meyer said. They are scared. That means we are about to touch the nerve. The headquarters of the Marquette Freight Consortium did not look like the glass and steel temples of finance where Graham spent his days. It was a fortress of red brick and reinforced concrete in the Seaport District, a building that smelled of diesel, salt water, and unyielding efficiency. I took the private elevator to the top floor, my hand resting on my stomach. The vibration of the heavy machinery below traveled up through the soles of my shoes. A low hum that felt like the building itself was growling. When the doors opened, my father was not waiting with a hug. Harlan Marquette was standing by a wall of monitors displaying shipping routes across the Atlantic. He turned as I stepped out. He looked older than I remembered, his hair completely white, but his eyes were as sharp as cut glass. He walked over to the mahogany conference table and slid a black heavy smartphone across the polished surface. Leave your old phone in the lead box by the door, Harlan said. His voice was not unkind, but it was devoid of softness. This one is encrypted. It has no GPS tracker that Graham can access. From this moment on, you are a ghost to him until we decide to haunt him. I did as I was told, dropping my sleek, expensive iPhone into the heavy metal box. It felt like dropping a part of my identity. I am scared, Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Good, Harlan replied. Fear keeps you alert. You do not need to be brave right now. Elise, you need to be precise. You need to survive. Civility is a luxury for people who are not being hunted. He gestured to the room. The team was already assembled. It was a strange, eclectic council of war. Meyer was there pacing the length of the room with a legal pad. Reed Callahan sat in the corner cleaning his glasses, but there were new faces too. "You remember your brother," Parents said. Noah Marquette spun around in his swivel chair. I had not spoken to Noah in 3 years. Not since he called Graham a snake in a bespoke suit at Thanksgiving. He looked tired, dressed in a hoodie that probably cost $20, but his fingers were flying across a keyboard. He looked at me and his expression softened. "Hey, Liz," he said, using the childhood nickname Graham hated. "I am sorry I was right." "Me too," I said. "And this?" Harlan continued, pointing to a woman with severe glasses and a stack of ledgers. "Is Daphne Shore. She finds money that people do not want found. And Dr. Lair Mendel, a geneticist who agreed to consult because she despises Jen Shore." Dr. Mendel nodded curtly. "What they do is an insult to science, Mrs. Wycliffe." We sat down. The atmosphere shifted instantly. It was no longer a family reunion. It was a tactical briefing. "We are fighting a forefront war," Meyer announced, slapping her hand on the whiteboard where she had drawn a complex diagram. "Graham thinks this is a simple divorce. We are going to turn it into a siege." She uncapped a red marker. "Fronte's defense." She said the guardianship petition. "We need to prove you are sane, stable, and capable. That means impeccable behavior. No outbursts, no public confrontations. Front B is assets." Daphne Shore spoke up. She pushed a spreadsheet toward me. "I have been tracking the cash flow from Graham's primary company, Astral Holdings. It is messy." "How messy?" I asked. "Criminal," Daphne said. "I found a pattern of consulting fees leaving Astral every quarter. Millions of dollars. They go to a company in Delaware called Blue Horizon Solutions. Blue Horizon has no employees, no website, and no office. It is a shell. And guess what Blue Horizon does?" "I don't know." I said. "It buys useless software licenses back from Astral at inflated prices." Daphne explained. "It is called round tripping. Graham is taking money out of one pocket, moving it to a shell company, and paying it back to himself as revenue to make Astral look more profitable than it is. He is inflating the stock price to secure loans. He is preparing for an IPO. I realized that is why he needs the books to look perfect." "Exactly." Daphne said. "If we expose this, he goes to prison, or at the very least the SEC destroys him." "Front C is the DNA," Dr. Mendel said. "We need to prove the Genscher report is fabricated and that the biological material was mishandled." "And front D," Noah said, his voice dark, "is the narrative." He projected an image onto the main screen. It was a screenshot of a folder structure from the ILF private cloud. "Graham is meticulous," Noah said. "He has a folder named Narrative. He created it 4 months ago." I stared at the screen. 4 months. He had been planning this while I was picking out nursery colors. Noah clicked the folder open. It was a library of gaslighting. There were emails to a psychiatrist I had never met detailing episodes of my hysteria that never happened. There were diary entries he had forged in my name, expressing thoughts of harming myself. There was a schedule for a crisis intervention. But the worst file was an image titled DNA Report Draft. "Look at this," Noah said, zooming in. It was a PDF of a paternity test result from Jen Shore. It stated 0% probability of paternity. But Noah pointed to the signature block at the bottom. "The signature of the lab director," Noah said. "Look at the pixels. It is fuzzy around the edges." It was copied and pasted from a low-resolution image. "This is not a real report, Elise. It is a mock-up. He built the evidence before he even sent the sample." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, displacing the fear. He had scripted my insanity. He had storyboarded my destruction like a marketing campaign. "He wants to take my baby," I said, my voice steady. "He does not care about being a father. He just wants the asset." "He wants the trust," Meyer corrected. "The baby is the key." Harlan leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. The room went silent. "You have a choice, Elise," my father said. "You can settle. You can take a few $1,000,000 and walk away and maybe fight for visitation. That is the safe path." "No," I said. "Good," Harlan said. "Then we fight. But listen to me carefully. You are angry. You want to hurt him. That is natural. But revenge is messy. Revenge gets you caught. He looked me in the eye. You do not need revenge. You need justice. But in this world against a man like Graham, if you want justice, sometimes you have to strike hard enough that it looks like revenge. What is the play? Reed asked. Simultaneous strike, Meyer said. We do not fire a warning shot. We drop everything at once. We file for an emergency asset freeze based on the fraud Daphne found. We file the counter-petition for the divorce. We subpoena the IVF records. And we asked the court to appoint an independent guardian ad litem for the unborn child. When I asked, we need him distracted. Reed said, we need him out of Boston. Reed looked down at his phone, which had just vibrated. He smiled, a tight, humorless expression. Well, ask and you shall receive, Reed said. My contact at the airline just pinged me. Graham Whitecliff has booked a private charter to Scottsdale, Arizona, departing in 48 hours. Scottsdale, I asked. He has a golf tournament there. He is not going for golf, Reed said. There is a second passenger on the manifest, Sloane Carrion. He is taking her on a baby moon, I said, the irony tasting like ash in my mouth. While he leaves his wife to deal with a mental breakdown, Harlan stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the harbor, where the cranes were lifting steel containers like they were toys. Let him go, Harlan said. Let him get comfortable. Let him think he has won. It is always easier to burn the house down when the owner is away. He turned back to me. Let him leave the nest, Elise. When he lands in Scottsdale, we will make sure he has no home to come back to. What do I do for the next 2 days? I asked. You go home, Myers said. You play the role he wrote for you. You act sad. You act confused. You make him feel powerful because a man who feels powerful stops looking over his shoulder. I stood up. I picked up the encrypted phone. I can do that. I said, I have been acting like I was happy for 7 years. Acting sad will be easy. One more thing, Noah said. I am installing a logger on the home network. If he tries to move any large data files while he is gone, we will know. And I will have a surveillance team on you 24 hours a day, Reed added. If he so much as raises a voice at you before he leaves, we intervene. The time for letting him hit you is over. I walked to the elevator. The metal doors reflected my face. I looked different. The softness around my eyes was gone. The hesitation in my posture had vanished. Graham had tried to break me to fit me into a box. He had no idea that by shattering the container, he had let everything dangerous spill out. I went back down to the street level. The cold wind hit me, but I did not shiver. I had a team. I had a plan. And for the first time, I knew exactly who Graham Whitecliff was. He was not a monster. Monsters were scary because they were unpredictable. Graham was just a criminal, and criminals could be caught. Returning to the townhouse felt like walking back into a crime scene before the crime had actually been committed. I unlocked the heavy oak door and stepped into the foyer. The house was silent, wrapped in that pristine, suffocating stillness that Graham loved and I had grown to hate. I went straight to the kitchen. If I was going to play the part of the chastened, frail wife, I needed props. I pulled vegetables from the refrigerator, carrots, celery, onions. The rhythmic sound of the knife hitting a cutting board was grounding. Chop, chop, chop. I imagined I was severing the invisible strings he had tied around my wrists. My phone, the encrypted one Harren had given me, was hidden deep inside my winter boot in the closet. The burr Reed gave me was taped under the vanity in the guest bathroom in my pocket. I carried only my official phone, the one Graham monitored. I heard the front door open at 7 in the evening. Elise, his voice echoed through the hallway. It was not the angry bark from the hospital. It was smooth, solicitous. It was the voice he used when donors were in the room. I am in the kitchen, Graham, I called out, keeping my voice light, just a little tremulous. He walked in, loosening his tie. He looked at the pot simmering on the stove, then at me. He walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. I forced myself not to flinch. I forced my muscles to remain loose, compliant. You should be resting, he said. Doctor, Evans said you were under too much stress. I wanted to make dinner, I said, turning to face him. I wanted things to be normal. He smiled. It was a terrifying expression because it did not reach his eyes. His eyes remained flat, calculating like a shark assessing the water temperature. "Normal is good," he said. "I know I was harsh yesterday. The murder is putting a lot of pressure on me, and seeing you in that state, it worried me. I know," I whispered, looking down at my hands. "I am sorry I embarrassed you." He lifted my chin with his finger. "You just need to listen to me. Elise, you are emotional right now. It is the hormones. You are not thinking clearly. That is why I need to make the decisions for a while." "Like the petition?" I asked softly. He froze. His hand dropped from my chin. "What petition?" I saw an email notification. I lied about guardianship. He laughed a short dismissive sound. He walked to the wine fridge and poured himself a glass of Pinot Noir. He did not offer me water. "That is just standard legal preparation. Elise, in case something happens during the delivery, if you are incapacitated, someone needs to have the legal authority to save the baby." He took a sip of wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. "You have been talking to your father, haven't you?" "I called him when I was scared," I said, "but we didn't talk much." "Heron is a dinosaur," Graham said, leaning against the marble island. "He thinks the world is still run by handshakes and brute force. He does not understand how the modern world works. He will just confuse you." "He worries about me," I said. Graham set the glass down. The sound of glass on marble was sharp. "He feeds your paranoia. Listen to me, Elise. Do not let him drag you into a legal mess. You will lose." "Why would I lose?" I asked, widening my eyes innocently. "I am the mother." Graham stepped closer. He invaded my personal space, his expensive cologne filling my nose. He lowered his voice and the mask slipped just an inch. "Because the court believes people with papers more than people with tears," he said. I felt the phone in my apron pocket. I had started the voice memo at the moment I heard his key in the lock. "What does that mean?" I asked, pushing him slightly. "Are you saying you have papers that prove I am unfit?" He smirked. "I am saying that if you fight back, if you try to make this difficult, I will file that petition for guardianship and I will win, and you will not decide anything about the baby. Not the name, not the doctor, not even who holds it first." My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I thought he must hear it. This was it. The threat, the proof of coercion. "I don't want to fight," I said, letting a tear slip out. It wasn't hard. The fear was real enough. "I just want us to be a family. Then be a good wife," Graham said. "Stay here. Rest. Take your medication. Let me handle the heavy lifting." He checked his watch. "I have to pack. I am leaving for Scottsdale in the morning. I have a meeting with the erratic investors from the venture capital group. I need to calm them down before the acquisition." "How long will you be gone?" I asked. 2 days, he said. 3 at the most." "Travel safe," I said. He kissed my forehead. It felt like a brand. "Be good. Elise." He walked out of the kitchen. I waited until I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I waited until the bedroom door closed. Then I pulled the phone from my pocket, stopped the recording, and saved the file to the hidden folder Noah had set up. I switched to the encrypted messaging app. I typed 3 words to Noah. He took the bait. The next morning the house was empty. Graham had left before dawn. I watched his town car pull away from the curb through the sheer curtains of the living room window. 10 minutes later, I was in a taxi, heading not to the grocery store, but to Dr. Jeeler Mendel's private clinic in Brooklyn. Dr. Mendel was waiting for me. Her office was nothing like the plush spa-like atmosphere of the North Quill Institute. It was small, white, and intensely clinical. A video camera was set up on a tripod facing the examination chair. "We are going to do this by the book, Mrs. W. Cliff, Doctor," Mendel said, snapping on blue latex gloves. "I will state the date, time, and procedure for the record. I will seal the samples in your presence. The courier is waiting outside to take them directly to the independent lab." "Will it hurt?" I asked. "It is an amniocentesis," she said. "It will be uncomfortable, but the truth is rarely painless." I lay back. I felt the needle, a sharp pressure in my abdomen. I closed my eyes and thought of the baby. "I am doing this for you," I thought. "I am finding out who you are so no one can lie about you." When it was over, Dr. Mendel held up 2 vials of clear fluid. She placed them in a biohazard bag, sealed it with red tape, and signed her name across the seal. She had me sign across it as well. "Elise," she said, her voice dropping the professional detachment for a moment, "you need to be prepared. If your suspicions are correct, if the DNA does not match your husband—" "I know," I said. "It could destroy a family," she said, "biologically and legally." "The family is already destroyed," I said, buttoning my coat. "I am just conducting the autopsy." I left the clinic and went straight to my father's house in Western. I could not go back to the townhouse. The air there was too thin. Harim was in his study, looking at a series of photographs spread out on his desk. Meyer and Reed were there, too. The mood in the room was electric. "He landed," Reed said without preamble. "He went straight to the Sanctuary Resort on Camelback Mountain." "And Sloane?" I asked. "She arrived on a separate flight 40 minutes later." Reed said, "They are in adjoining suites." He slid a photo across the desk. It was taken with a long-range lens. Graham and Sloane were sitting on a terrace, but they were not drinking cocktails. They were poring over a stack of documents with a third person. "Who is the man in the suit?" I asked. That, Meyer said, pointing a manicured finger at the photo, "is Arthur Vane. He is not an investor. He is a specialized trust attorney who handles dynasty trusts for high net worth families." Why would Graham meet him? "We hacked the audio from a nearby table." Reed said, "It is Patty. Wind noise is bad, but we got snippets." He pressed play on a laptop. Static hissed. Then Graham's voice cut through, tiny but distinct. "Grandfather's clause is specific. Valid biological heir. If the paternity is contested in the divorce, does that pause the succession trigger?" Then another voice, presumably Arthur Vane. "Only if the child is proven not to be of the blood. But if you have custody and the DNA links to the patriarch, you bypass the wife entirely." Meyer hit pause. Air clores. Meyer said, "It is exactly what we feared. Graham is trying to thread a needle. He wants to divorce you and claim the child is not his to avoid paying you half his fortune. But he wants to claim the child as a Wycliffe Vire Victor's blood to satisfy the trust and keep his control over the company. He wants to have his cake and eat it too." Harlem rumbled. "He wants the money from the trust and the freedom from the marriage. He thinks he can do it because he assumes I will be out of the picture." I said, "He thinks I will be in a mental institution or stripped of my rights. He is building a kingdom on a foundation of sand." I said, "And we are about to bring the tide in." Meyer said, "That night I stayed in my old bedroom at my father's house. It still looked the same as it had when I was 18. Posters of indie bands on the wall, a stack of classic novels on the nightstand. It felt like a museum of a girl who no longer existed." I lay in the twin bed, my hand on my stomach. The baby kicked a strong, decisive movement against my palm. "I am sorry," I whispered into the dark. "I am sorry your father is a thief. I am sorry your grandfather is a ghost, but you are mine, and I will not let them turn you into a line item on a ledger. I will not let anyone write your story but me." I fell into a fitful sleep, dreaming of needles and judges and Graham's cold, shark-like smile. I woke to the sound of rain against the window. It was gray outside, the kind of morning that felt like a warning. My encrypted phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Meyer. I sat up, my heart pounding. I answered. "Tell me," I said. "We got it," Meyer said. Her voice was tight with adrenaline. The judge reviewed the emergency petition and the evidence of financial dissipation Daphne found. He was not happy about the consulting fees to the shell company, and he granted the emergency hearing. Meyer said Graham has been served, or he will be the moment he steps out of his hotel room in Scottsdale. We are on the docket for Friday morning. That is in 3 days. I said 72 hours. Meyer corrected. 72 hours to finalize the DNA, analyze the financial records, and prepare the witnesses. If we want to win this, Elise, this is the only window we have. Graham will be coming back angry. He will be coming back with his own lawyers. But for now, we have the element of surprise." "I am ready," I said. "Get dressed," Meyer said. "We are going to war." I hung up. I looked at the rain sliding down the glass. Graham thought he was the one writing the ending. He thought the judge would lift that gavel and give him everything. He had forgotten one thing. He had forgotten that even the most carefully constructed lies eventually rot, and when they do, the smell draws the predators. I was done being the prey. The war did not begin with a cannon blast. It began with the quiet, rhythmic thud of a date stamp at the Suffolk County Clerk's office at 9 in the morning. While Graham was presumably ordering his first espresso at the Sanctuary Resort in Scottsdale, Meyer de Leon walked up to the clerk's window. She did not look like a woman filing a standard divorce petition. She looked like an executioner. She slid a stack of documents under the glass partition. Emergency motion for restraining order. Meyer texted me from the courthouse. Motion to freeze marital assets. Motion for full financial disclosure. I was sitting in the war room at my father's office watching the notifications roll in on the large monitors. It felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a tactical airstrike. The clerk is processing it. Meyer messaged. The judge is in chambers. We are asking for the freeze based on imminent dissipation of assets. Daphne's report on the shell companies is attached as exhibit across the table. Daphne Shore was typing furiously. She was not dealing with the family court. She was aiming much higher. The whistleblower complaint to the Securities and Exchange Commission is ready. Daphne announced, her finger hovering over the enter key. I have outlined the consulting fees. $2 million funneled to Blue Horizon Solutions in the last fiscal quarter alone. Another $4 million projected for the current quarter. This is classic revenue inflation to boost the valuation before the initial public offering. Send it, Harron said. He was standing by the window, his back to us, watching the gray harbor. Daphne hit the key. Sent copies are also going to the state attorney general's office regarding corporate tax fraud. Next to her, my brother Noah was working on the digital forensics. I am uploading the metadata analysis of the DNA report. Noah said, I have highlighted the pixel disparity in the signature block. I also traced the creation date of the file. It was created 3 weeks before Graham even went to the lab. It proves premeditated fraud. I am sending this directly to the court clerk to be appended to Meyer's filing. Sent, Noah said a moment later. The room was filled with the hum of hard drives and the scratching of pens. We were systematically dismantling Graham's life piece by piece from 1,000 miles away. Reed just checked in, Noah said, pulling up a secure chat window. He has Caravos. I looked at the screen. Reed was at a safe house in River. She is shaking. Reed's message read, but she is signing. We have the affidavit. She swears she saw the sample swap. She swears she saw the donor code VW01. We are notarizing it now. She is officially a protected witness. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Carrara was the linchpin. Without her, the DNA was just a messy anomaly. With her, it was a conspiracy. Then my father moved. Harlon walked to his desk and picked up the landline. He did not use his cell phone. He sat down and dialed a number from memory. The room went quiet. We all knew who he was calling. George Harlon said, his voice dropping into a warm, deceptively friendly baritone. George Alcott was the managing partner of the venture capital firm that was leading the investment round for Astral Holdings. Harron, I could hear the tingy voice on the other end. To what do I owe the pleasure? We haven't played poker in 6 months. I am afraid my poker days are over, George, Harlon said, leaning back in his leather chair. I am just calling as a friend. I heard a rumor on the street. You know how the logistics business is. We hear everything. But rumor. I heard there might be some discrepancies in the receivables column of a certain tech holding company you are looking at. Harlon said, Vale. Is it? There was a silence on the line. A heavy, expensive silence. Graham Wycliffe's company. George asked, his voice tighter. We are in final due diligence. The books look clean. Books can be written in many languages. George, Harlon said softly, I am not telling you what to do with your money. I am just saying that, if I were you, I would verify the existence of a vendor called Blue Horizon Solutions before I signed a check for $50 million. Harlon hung up. He looked at me and winked. It was a cold, hard wink. That is how you start a fire without a match. 20 minutes later, the monitors flashed. Alert, Noah said. Traffic spike on the Astral internal server, board of directors level. They are panicking. Daphne said, reading the data stream. An emergency board meeting has just been called. Subject audit inquiry. George Alcott must have called the CFO immediately. The IPO is dead in the water, Harlan said with satisfaction. Or at least it is paused long enough for the rats to start eating each other, but Graham did not know yet. He was in Arizona, 3 time zones behind, likely enjoying the morning sun. Reed has eyes on the resort, Noah said. Graham is at breakfast with Sloane. They look relaxed. I closed my eyes and imagined him. He would be wearing his white polo shirt. He would be drinking his grapefruit juice. He would be smiling at Sloane, telling her that I was a problem that had been solved. Then the first domino hit him. Target is on the phone, Reed messaged. He looks agitated. I could picture it. The call from his CFO. The accounts are frozen. Graham, the bank flagged the transfers to Blue Horizon. The SEC just sent a preservation notice. He is standing up. Reed updated. He is yelling at the waiter. Sloane is trying to calm him down. He just threw his napkin on the table. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Graham hated losing control. He hated looking foolish in public. He is checking his banking app, Noah said, monitoring the logs. He is trying to move funds from the joint account to his personal checking. Blocked, Daphne said, smiling. Meyer's order hit the bank 10 minutes ago. The joint account is locked. He cannot move a cent. He just tried became an account. Noah said, denied. He is calling his lawyer, Reed messaged. He is red in the face. He is shouting about a glitch. It is not a glitch. Graham, I whispered to the screen. It is your wife. According to Reed, Graham stormed back to his suite, leaving Sloane alone at the table. He was confident. He was arrogant. He believed that even if the money was frozen, he still held the ultimate trump card. He believed I was weak. An hour later, a courier arrived at the Marquette offices. He was not one of ours. He was a process server. Delivery for Elise Marquette, W. Liv, the man said, handing a thick envelope to the receptionist. I took the envelope. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the confrontation. I opened it. It was the emergency petition. Graham had filed it electronically from Arizona before breakfast. Petition for emergency guardianship. Petitioner Graham Wycliffe. Respondent Elise Wycliffe. I scanned the legal jargon. It was brutal. It described me as paranoid, delusional, and suffering from severe prenatal psychosis. It claimed I had threatened to harm the unborn child. It claimed I had hallucinated a history of domestic violence. And there stapled to the back was Exhibit B, DNA Paternity Report, Genscher Laboratories, Probability of Paternity. I stared at the paper. It was exactly what Noah had found on the cloud. The fake report, the doctored signature. Graham had actually done it. He had submitted a forged document to a court of law. Meyer, I said, holding up the paper. Meyer walked over and took the document. She read it, and a slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. He did it, she said. He actually did it. Is that bad? I asked. That Meyer laughed. Elise, this is the best thing he could have done. If he had just argued you were crazy, it would be his word against yours. It would be a messy custody battle. But this is objective, verifiable fraud. He just submitted forged evidence to a judge. He didn't just step into a trap. He built the gallows, tied the knot, and put his own head in the noose. So we have him. We have him on perjury. Meyer said we have him on fraud. And once the real DNA comes back, we will have him on whatever twisted game he is playing with Victor's legacy. The judge is going to be furious. Parents said judges hate being lied to more than they hate murder. We filed a response immediately. Meyer said, we attach Noah's metadata analysis of this report. We attach Carparo's affidavit. We tell the judge the husband is not just lying. He's manufacturing evidence to steal a child. I sat down feeling the exhaustion wash over me. It was done. The trap was sprung. But Graham W. Cliff was a billionaire, and billionaires did not go down quietly. Reed says Graham is leaving the hotel. Noah said he is heading to the airport. He is coming back early. Let him come. Parents said the welcome party is ready. I looked at my phone, the public one, which I had turned back on. It was silent. No calls from Graham. He was smart enough not to leave a voicemail now that the lawyers were involved. But then the phone started to buzz. Not a call, a notification, then another, then a flood. Instagram, Twitter, text messages from people I had not spoken to in years. Oh my God. Elise, is it true? I saw the article. Stay strong. How could you do that to him? My blood ran cold. No, I said. Check the news. Noah typed quickly. His face fell. Front page of the Boston Informer. He said quietly. He turned the screen toward me. The headline was screaming in bold. Black letters, billionaire baby scandal wife. Fakes pregnancy timeline as DNA reveals shocking betrayal. There was a photo of me taken weeks ago looking tired and unkempt coming out of a yoga class. And next to it, a blurred image of the Genscher report. The article was vicious. It claimed unnamed sources. Obviously, Sloan confirmed that I had trapped Graham with a pregnancy that wasn't his, that I was mentally unstable, and that Graham was the heartbreaking victim of a gold digger's long con. He leaked it, I whispered. He knew the legal route might fail, so he went to the press. He's trying to destroy your reputation so that even if you win in court, you lose in society, Parlon said, his voice low and dangerous. He is scorching the earth. I looked at the article. I looked at the comments, already flooding in, calling me a liar, a monster. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I forced them back. He thinks this hurts me, I said, standing up. He thinks shame works on me. I touched my belly. He forgot one thing. I said to the room, I don't care what strangers think. I only care about the judge. And Graham just handed the judge a forged weapon. We need a statement. Daphne said, we need to deny it. No, I said, no denials, no defensive statements. I looked at Meyer. Silence, I said. Let him scream. Let him spin his story. Let him think he is winning the court of public opinion, because when we walk into that courtroom on Friday, I am not going to argue with him in the papers. I looked at the headline one last time. I am going to destroy him with the truth, and the truth does not need a press release. The phone kept buzzing, vibrating across the table like an angry insect. I reached out and turned it off. The silence returned to the room, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was the heavy, suffocating silence before a storm breaks. Graham was coming home, and he was bringing the whole world with him. The internet does not sleep, and unfortunately neither does malice. By the time the sun rose over Boston on Wednesday morning, my life had been reduced to a hashtag. I sat in the back of my father's town car looking at the tablet Noah had handed me. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from a violation so profound it felt physical. A photo was trending on every social media platform. It was a grainy and high-contrast shot of me leaving Harborview Women's Center 2 days ago. In the image, my hair was messy, my hand was clutching my stomach, and my face was twisted in pain and shock the exact moment after Graham had slapped me. But the caption did not say, "Billionaire abuses pregnant wife." The caption, posted by a verified gossip account with 2 million followers, read, "The face of guilt. Ellie Wycliffe spotted fleeing hospital after DNA bomb drops. Sources say the baby isn't his." Stop looking at it, Noah said gently, trying to take the tablet away. I need to see it, I said, my voice brittle. I need to know what they are saying. Below the photo, a blurry document was circulating. It was the leaked Genscher report. It was redacted enough to look official, but clear enough to show the words "probability of paternity 0%. The comments were a cesspool. Gold digger but court. She looks crazy. Poor Graham. Imagine building an empire and coming home to this. Graham had not just declared war in court. He had unleashed a mob. He had weaponized the public's love for a fallen hero narrative. He was the betrayed king, and I was the adulterous queen who deserved the guillotine. "We are here," the driver announced. I looked up. We were parked in front of the Riverton Community Initiatives building, the nonprofit where I had worked as a program director for 5 years. It was my sanctuary. It was the one place where I was not Graham W. Liff's wife, but just Elise, the woman who organized food drives and literacy programs. "Do you want me to come in?" Noah asked. "No," I said, straightening my coat. "I need to do this alone. I need to show them I am not hiding." I stepped onto the sidewalk. Immediately, flashes went off. I hadn't even seen them. 3 photographers popped out from behind a parked van. "Elisa, is the baby the gardener's?" Did he hit you or did you make it up? Elise, look here. Look sad for us. I kept my head down, shielding my belly, and pushed through the glass doors. The lobby was quiet, but the receptionist, a girl I had brought coffee to 100 times, refused to meet my eyes. Sarah is waiting for you in her office, she whispered. I walked down the familiar hallway. The photos on the wall, me at a charity gala, me handing out backpacks, suddenly looked like they belonged to a stranger. Sarah, the executive director, was standing behind her desk. She did not offer me a seat. Elise, she said, her voice tight. We saw the news. It is a lie, Sarah. I said, Graham is manipulating the press. We are filing a countersuit on Friday. I believe you, Sarah said, but her body language screamed otherwise. She crossed her arms. But the board, they are concerned. We have the annual fundraising gala next month. Graham is a major donor. Half our donor list is connected to his circle. So we can't have the distraction, Sarah said, finally looking at me. The phones have been ringing all morning. People are threatening to pull pledges if we harbor a fraud. Those were their words. Elise, not mine. My stomach dropped. You are firing me. Administrative leave, she corrected quickly. Indefinite. Just until this blows over. Until the DNA is sorted out. It is sorted out, I said, my voice rising. I am the victim here, Sarah. In the court of public opinion, you are a liability, she said coldly. Please clear your desk. Security will escort you out the back. I walked out of that building 10 minutes later with a cardboard box containing 5 years of my life. I did not cry. The tears had dried up, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fury in my chest. Graham had taken my home. Now he had taken my work. He was stripping me down to nothing, ensuring that when I finally broke, there would be no safety net to catch me. Back at the Marquette headquarters, the mood was suffocating. The blinds were drawn. He is back, Reed Callahan said as I walked in. He pointed to the screen. A live news feed showed a private jet landing at Logan Airport. Graham descended the stairs, looking tired, unshaven, and perfectly sympathetic. Sloane Carrion was a few steps behind him, dressed in black, acting the part of the supportive friend. A reporter thrust a microphone in his face. Mr. Wycliffe, is it true you are filing for divorce? Graham stopped. He looked right into the camera. He looked right at me. I asked for privacy, Graham said, his voice thick with emotion. I loved my wife. I wanted a family more than anything. To find out that the foundation of our marriage was a lie is devastating. I just want to ensure the safety of the child, regardless of biology. She is unwell. She has fabricated stories of abuse to cover her tracks. I just want to get her help. He wiped a non-existent tear from his eye and got into his waiting SUV. He is good, Reed muttered. I will give him that. He is very good. He is lying, I said, slamming my box onto the table. And we are going to prove it. We have a problem, Harlan said from the head of the table. His voice was low. Dangerous, a leak. But the reporters knew you were going to Riverton this morning. Harlan said they knew exactly which door you would use, and Graham's legal team just filed a preemptive motion to block us from accessing the Asterail financial server logs. They cited the exact statutes Daffy was planning to use. Someone is talking, Meir said, pacing the room. Someone in this room, or in my firm, is feeding them our playbook. I looked around. My father, no, Reed, Daphne, Meyer. It was impossible. These were the only people I trusted. It is not us, Reed said. I swept the room for bugs. It is clean. Then it is digital, Noah said. He started typing furiously. Someone is mirroring our communications. No, Reed said. It is simpler than that. Someone is desperate. Reed walked out of the room. He came back 2 minutes later, dragging a young man by the collar of his shirt. It was Kevin, a paralegal contractor who had been helping Daphne organize the mountains of financial documents. Kevin looked pale, sweating profusely. Check his pockets, Reed barked. Noah grabbed Kevin's jacket. He pulled out a cheap flip phone, a burner. I found it in the bathroom trash, Reed said. But he forgot to wipe the call log. 3 calls to a number registered to a T. Vane Graham's crisis consultant. Harlan stood up. He walked over to Kevin. He did not yell. He just looked at him with eyes that had seen union wars and docile brawls. "Why?" Harlan asked. "I owe money," Kevin stammered, tears streaming down his face. "Gambling $20,000. They said they would pay it off. They said no one would get hurt. They just wanted a heads up." "Get him out of here," Harren said quietly. "Before I forget, I am a civilized man." Reed dragged the weeping boy out. "We are compromised," I said, sinking into a chair. "They know everything. They know about the SEC complaint. They know about the subpoena for the IVF records." "Not everything," Mir said. She stopped pacing, her eyes narrowed. "They know what we have done. They do not know what we are going to do." "Kevin has been leaking our schedule," Meyer continued, "but we can use that. Graham thinks he has a direct line to our strategy. Let's give him one. A trap." "I realized a barium meal," Meyer said in intelligence work. "You feed false information to see where it comes out. We are going to draft a fake legal strategy document. We are going to make it look official. We will put a digital watermark on it, and we will send it to Kevin's email account as if we didn't know he was gone yet." "What is in the document?" I asked. Meyer smiled. It was a shark smile. "We are going to write a draft motion stating that you are prepared to settle, that you will admit to infidelity in exchange for a $5 million payout and a non-disclosure agreement regarding his business practices." "But I won't do that." I said. "Graham doesn't know that." Meyer said. "If he thinks you are ready to fold, he will get sloppy. He will try to push the advantage immediately." Noah drafted the fake document in 10 minutes. "Confidential strategy memo settlement parameters." He sent it to Kevin's suspended email address, which we knew Graham's hackers were likely monitoring. Then we waited. 1 hour passed, then 2. At 3:00 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the court system. New filing petitioner WLF. Motion to enforce settlement negotiation. Graham's lawyers had taken the bait. They had filed a motion referencing recent communications regarding respondents' willingness to concede adultery. "Got him?" Meyer said, slamming her hand on the table. "I asked. "We never communicated that to them." Meyer said the only place that information existed was in the fake document we just planted. By filing this motion, they have legally admitted to accessing privileged attorney-client communications. That is a felony. That is espionage. "We can get his lawyers disbarred for this," Harlan said, a grin finally breaking his stoic face. "And we can show the judge that Graham is not a victim." Meyer said. "He is a cheat who spies on his wife's legal counsel." "No," I said. "What about the picture, the DNA report online?" Noah spun his screen around. "I finished the analysis," he said. "I tracked the source of the upload. It wasn't a random hacker. The file was uploaded from an IP address at the Sanctuary Resort in Scottsdale. The timestamp on the file modification, where they blurred the name and added the 0% text, matches exactly to the time Graham's iPad was active on the hotel Wi-Fi. We have the digital fingerprint." Noah said he edited it himself. He didn't even trust Sloan to do it. "So we have him on spying." I said. "We have him on defamation. We have him on manufacturing evidence. We have everything." Meyer said, "Except the one thing that matters most." The room went silent. We all knew what she meant. The real DNA test, the court-ordered chain of custody test that Dr. Mendel had sent to the independent lab. The one Graham couldn't touch. The one that would prove who my baby really was. If it matched Graham, I was a liar about the IVF switch. If it matched no one, we were back to square one. But if it matched Victor. My phone rang. The sound was loud in the quiet room. The caller ID displayed Dr. Leah Mendel. I picked it up. My hand was trembling so hard I almost dropped it. "Elise." Dr. Mendel's voice was uncharacteristically shaky. "I am here," I whispered. Everyone in the room was looking at me. Harren, Meyer, Noah, Reed, they were all holding their breath. The courier just brought the results back from the independent lab. Dr. Mendel said, "I have the report in front of me." "Tell me," I said. "Elise," she said, and I heard the rustle of paper. "You should sit down." I am sitting," I lied. I was standing, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. "The test confirms that the fetus is male. Doctor, Mendel began a son. I was having a son and the paternity," I asked, my voice barely audible. "The probability of paternity for Graham W. Cliff is 0%. She said. I closed my eyes. Graham had told the truth about one thing. He wasn't the father. However, doctor," Mendel continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "we ran the secondary comparison you requested using the familial markers from the grand paternal line. And Elise, she said, the probability of paternity for Victor Wycliffe is 99.9%. The room spun. "It is Victor," I repeated, looking at my father. "It is Victor." Harlan's face went pale. Meyer let out a sharp breath. "But there is something else, doctor," Mendel said rapidly. "Something that doesn't make sense. The lab flagged an anomaly. They ran a sibling match between the fetus and Graham's DNA profile, the one we have on file. A sibling match. Yes. If Graham and the baby are both sons of Victor, they should share approximately 50% of their DNA. They should be half-siblings. And do they? No. Doctor, Mendel said, they share 0 DNA. Nothing. Not a single marker. I froze. What does that mean? It means, doctor, Mendel said, that Graham W. Liff is not Victor's son. He is not a Whitecliff. He has no biological relation to the man he calls his father. The phone almost slipped from my hand. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. Graham wasn't just stealing my baby to secure the trust. He was stealing the baby because he was the fraud. He wasn't the heir. He never was. My unborn son was the only true Wycliffe left. "Oh my God," I whispered. "He isn't fighting for custody because he wants a son. He is fighting because if anyone finds out the truth, he loses the entire empire." I looked at Meyer. "We have the weapon," I said, "and it is bigger than we ever imagined." The physical copy of the DNA report sat in the center of the mahogany conference table. It looked innocent enough, just a few sheets of white paper inside a standard manila envelope. But we all stared at it as if it were a ticking bomb that had already counted down to 0. Dr. Mendel's voice had faded from the speakerphone, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like it would crush my ribs. My hands were resting on my lap, trembling with a violence I could not control. I looked at Meyer. She was the only one brave enough to reach out. She opened the envelope. The sound of tearing paper was the loudest thing in the room. Meyer pulled out the document. She scanned the summary page, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. She did not gasp. She did not flinch. She just froze. "Read it," I whispered. My throat felt like it was filled with glass. Meyer looked up at me, and for the first time in 20 years of friendship, I saw pure unadulterated horror in her eyes. "The probability of paternity for Graham W. Liff is 0%. Meyer said, her voice flat. "He is excluded as the biological father. We knew that." I said, "Read the rest." Meyer took a breath. "The secondary comparison against the familial profile of Victor Wycliffe indicates a probability of paternity of 99.9%. I closed my eyes. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. It was true. The nightmare was real. My husband had not just used a donor. He had not just lied to me. He had violated the most fundamental boundary of nature. He had used his own father's genetic material to impregnate his wife without consent, without knowledge, turning me into a vessel for a twisted family legacy. It is incest by proxy," Reed muttered from the corner, looking physically ill. "It is worse," Meyer said, dropping the paper. "It is a coup." I looked at the report again. "So Graham isn't the father. Victor is. But Graham thinks he is Victor's son. So he thinks he gave me his half-brother. No, doctor." Mendel spoke up from the phone line, her voice cutting through the fog. "Elise, remember the sibling test. If Graham were Victor's son, he would share DNA with your baby. He shares 0. Graham knows he is not Victor's biological son. He has known it all along. That is why he did this." The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. Graham was a fraud. He was not a Wycliffe by blood. The trust, the billions of dollars locked away in the family estate, required a biological descendant to unlock the capital. Graham could never access it himself, so he stole his father's sperm, planted it in me, and created a child that was a true Wycliffe. He didn't want a son. He wanted a key. He needs the baby, I realized, my voice shaking. He needs the baby to open the vault, but he needs me gone so he can control the key. Exactly. Myers said, that is why he is claiming you cheated. If he proves you are an adulteress, he gets full custody. He becomes the sole guardian of the only biological heir to the White Cliff fortune. He gets the money, the power, and the company, and you get destroyed. It is evil, I whispered. It is pure distilled evil. Before I could spiral further, Reed's phone rang. He answered it, listened for 5 seconds, and his face went ashen. Turn on the news, Reed barked. Channel 4. Noah grabbed the remote. The screen flickered to life. The banner at the bottom of the screen was red and urgent. Breaking news. A reporter was standing outside Mass General Hospital confirming reports that industrialist Victor W. Liff has been admitted to the ICU following a massive hemorrhagic stroke. Sources close to the family say the prognosis is critical. The W. Liff Board of Directors has convened an emergency session regarding the succession plan. He is dying. Reed said Victor is dying. That is why Graham accelerated the timeline. Harlan said, slamming his fist onto the table. He knew this was coming. The moment Victor dies, the trust activates. If there is no biological heir, the money goes to charity. Graham needs that baby to be declared his or at least under his control before the old man stops breathing. We have to stop him, I said, standing up. We have to show the judge the report. We have to tell the world that Graham is a fraud and the baby is Victor's. Wait, Muir said sharply. Think, Elise. Think about what happens if you walk into court tomorrow and announce that you're pregnant with your father-in-law's child. I stopped. The implication washed over me. The press will crucify you, Myers said. They won't understand the science. They will just see the headline. Wife pregnant by father-in-law. Graham will spin it. He will say, you seduced the old man. He will say, you are the sick one. He will turn the victim into the villain, and the judge might be so disgusted he puts the baby in foster care. So what do? I cried out. If I tell the truth, I look like a monster. If I lie, Graham wins. I felt trapped. The walls of the office were closing in. Graham had constructed a labyrinth where every turn led to my destruction. We don't tell the whole truth yet, Noah said. We tell the strategic truth. Noah spun his laptop around. We ask the court to seal the paternity results. Noah proposed. We file a motion stating that the DNA results show severe irregularities consistent with medical malpractice at the IVF clinic. We do not name Victor. We just say the baby is not Graham's, but the mother did not cheat. We shift the focus to the chain of custody, and then we drop the hammer. Noah said, we ask the court to order a comparative DNA test for all parties to resolve the medical error. We demand a test for Graham and a test for Victor. Myers smiled. That is brilliant. Graham cannot take a court-ordered DNA test against Victor. If he does, it proves he isn't a Wycliffe. He will be exposed as a bastard and lose his claim to the company immediately. He will have to withdraw his petition to save his own skin. We trap him, I said. We force him to choose between destroying me and saving himself. He will choose himself. Harlan said, men like Graham always choose themselves. Just then, the fax machine in the corner whirred to life. It screeched, spitting out a document with an urgent header. Meyer walked over and picked it up. She read the cover sheet, and her jaw dropped. You have got to be kidding me, she said. But now? I asked. Did he file for immediate custody? No, Meyer said, handing me the paper. It is not from Graham. It is from Sloane Carrion. I looked at the document. It was a motion to intervene. Petitioner Sloane Carrion. Statement of interest. The petitioner claims to be 12 weeks pregnant with the biological child of Graham W. Liff. Petitioner seeks to establish paternity to secure beneficiary status under the W. Cliff Family Trust. I stared at the paper, then a sound escaped my throat. It started as a choke, then turned into a laugh, a hysterical, dark laugh that I couldn't stop. She is pregnant, I gasped. She thinks she is pregnant with his child. She wants a piece of the payout. Reed said she saw the news about Victor dying and decided to secure her own golden parachute. She is lying, I said, wiping tears of mirth from my eyes. Or she is the one who cheated. "What do you mean?" Harlon asked. "Graham has a ospermere," I said. "Carrara told us he has a zero sperm count. That is why we did IVF. That is why he used his father's sample. It is physically impossible for Graham to get Sloane pregnant naturally." The room went silent again as the pieces clicked into place. "So either Sloane is lying to get money," Myers said, "or she is sleeping with someone else and thinks it is Graham's." "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice hardening. "It is leverage. Graham knows he is sterile. When he sees this motion, he will know Sloane is betraying him too. He is alone. He just doesn't know it yet. This is it." Myers said the house of cards is falling. "Monday morning," I said, "the hearing is set for 9:00. We have 36 hours. Harrant said, "Get some sleep, Elise. You are going to need it." I did not sleep. I went back to the guest room and sat by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. I kept my hand on my stomach, feeling the slow, rhythmic hiccups of the baby. My son, who carried the blood of a dying billionaire and the legacy of a broken family. I thought about Graham. I imagined him in his penthouse, looking at the city, thinking he had won, thinking he was the smartest man in the room. He was about to walk into a courtroom expecting a coronation. I stood up and looked at my reflection in the glass. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I didn't look like the scared woman in the hospital gown. "You want a villain, Graham?" I whispered to the rain. "I will be the villain. I will be the one who tears your world apart." Monday morning at the Suffolk Probate and Family Court felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a gladiatorial execution. The air outside was thick with the humidity of the Crown. Reporters jostled against the barricades, their cameras creating a strobe light effect that was disorienting even behind sunglasses. I stepped out of the car. The noise was a physical wall. They shouted my name. They shouted the headlines Graham had planted. Liar, fraud, cheater. I kept my head high, flanked by Meyer on my left and Noah on my right. We moved as a phalanx, silent and impenetrable. We did not offer quotes. We did not defend ourselves. We just walked toward the heavy brass doors. Then a roar went up from the crowd behind us. Graham had arrived. He stepped out of his black SUV with the practiced grace of a politician. He was wearing a navy suit that cost more than most people's cars, cut to emphasize his broad shoulders. And on his arm, bold as a declaration of war, was Sloane Carrion. She wore a modest black dress, her face a mask of supportive sorrow. He paused on the steps. He tightened his grip on Sloane's hand. He offered a sad, weary wave to the cameras. It was perfect. He was the benevolent king, wounded by a treacherous wife, seeking solace in the arms of a true friend. I watched them for a second before the doors closed behind me. "He thinks this is a coronation," Noah whispered, his voice tight. "Let him enjoy the walk," Meyer said, adjusting her briefcase. "The drop is always higher from the throne." Inside Courtroom 4, the atmosphere was pressurized. The gallery was packed with journalists who had fought for a seat. The judge, the Honorable Alistair Vance, sat behind the bench like a gargoyle, his face unreadable. We took our seats at the defense table. Graham and his lawyer, a silver-haired shark named Sterling, who charged $1,000 an hour, sat opposite us. Sloane sat in the front row directly behind Graham, a visual reminder of his new family. "All rise." The ballet bellowed. Judge Vance shuffled the stack of files in front of him. He looked over his spectacles at Graham. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "this is your emergency petition. Proceed." Sterling stood up. He did not shout. He used the quiet, reasonable tone of a man who is regrettably forced to state ugly truths. "Your Honor," Sterling began, "we are here today to protect an unborn child. My client, Mr. Wycliffe, has endured months of deception. His wife, the respondent, is suffering from severe psychological instability. She has fabricated incidents of domestic abuse to alienate the father. She has threatened to harm the pregnancy despite him. We have affidavit from medical professionals stating she is high risk." He walked to the evidence table and picked up a document. "But the most egregious act," Sterling continued, "is the paternity fraud. My client desperately wanted this family. He supported his wife through IVF. He believed this child was his heir. But when doubts arose regarding her fidelity, he commissioned a DNA test. Sterling handed the paper to the bailiff. "This is a report from Genscher Laboratories," Sterling said, his voice ringing in the silence. "It confirms that there is 0% probability that Graham W. Liff is the biological father. The respondent has not only been unfaithful, she has attempted to pass off an illegitimate child as the heir to the W. Cliff Trust. We ask for immediate temporary guardianship of the unborn child to ensure proper medical care and a restraining order against Mrs. W. Liff." Graham looked down at the table, shaking his head as if the shame was too much to bear. The judge looked at the report. Then he looked at me. "MS. To Leon," the judge said. "Response." Meyer stood up. She did not look at the judge. She looked at Graham. "Your Honor," Meyer said, "the petitioner paints a tragic picture. But a painting is only as good as the canvas it is on. And this canvas is rotten." Meyer picked up a copy of the Genscher report. "Mr. Sterling calls this evidence." Meyer said, "I call it a creative writing exercise. I would like to ask Mr. Wycliffe a few questions regarding the procurement of this document." The judge nodded briefly. Graham stood up. He looked confident. He had rehearsed this. "Mr. Wycliffe," Meyer said, "when was this sample collected?" 2 weeks ago," Graham said smoothly, "at my home." "And who collected it?" "A technician from the lab." "Name?" Graham blinked. "I did not get his name." "He was wearing a uniform." "Strange," Meyer said, "because Genschau's own protocols require the technician to sign the chain of custody form. This form is blank. Furthermore, Mr. Wycliffe, can you explain why the metadata on the digital file of this report shows it was created 3 weeks before the date you claimed the sample was taken?" Graham stiffened. Sterling shot up. "Objection. Relevance. It goes to the authenticity of the evidence, Your Honor," Meyer said sharply. "This report is a forgery. It was drafted before a test was ever run. It is a prop. The objection is overruled," the judge said, narrowing his eyes at Graham. "Answer the question." "It must be a clerical error," Graham said, his smile tight. "The science is accurate. The child is not mine." "On that point," Meyer said, "we actually agree, but not for the reasons you claim." Meyer turned to the back of the room. "The defense calls Kara Voss." A murmur went through the gallery. Graham turned around and for the first time his composure cracked. He stared at the small, pale woman walking down the aisle. Kara took the stand. She swore to tell the truth. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. "MS. Boss," Meyer said, "where were you employed 2 years ago?" "North Quill Fertility Institute." Kara said, "I was a junior embryologist." "Do you recall the IVF cycle for Mr. and Mrs. Wycliffe?" "I do." "Why?" "Because I saw the sample vials," Kara said. She looked directly at Graham. "The vial used to fertilize Mrs. W. Liff's eggs was not labeled with Graham W. Liff Stono code. The label had been placed over another sticker. I saw the code underneath. It was VWW01. The room buzzed. Sterling was on his feet instantly. "Objection!" Sterling shouted. "Hearsay. This witness was fired for incompetence. She is a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. Her testimony is unreliable." "I was fired because I asked questions," Kara shouted back, her fear vanishing. "I saw what I saw. They switched the samples." "Strike the witness's outburst," the judge ordered, but he was writing furiously in his notebook. Sterling smirked. He thought he had neutralized her. He thought he had muddied the waters enough to make her look like a liar. But then the doors at the back of the room did not open. Instead, a voice spoke up from the front row. "Your Honor," it was a woman's voice, clear, entitled. Sloane Carrion stood up. Sterling looked confused. "M. Carrion, please sit down." "No," Sloane said. She stepped past the bar, her hand on her stomach. She looked at Graham, then at me. She wasn't looking at us with sympathy anymore. She was looking at us with triumph. "I have filed a motion to intervene," Sloane announced. "My lawyer filed it this morning." "MS. Carrion," Judge Vance said, his voice dangerous. "This is highly irregular. I have a material interest in this case," Sloane said. She pulled a document from her purse. "Mr. Wycliffe claims his wife's child is not his heir. He is right, but that does not mean he has no heir." She paused for effect. The cameras in the gallery were zooming in. "I am 12 weeks pregnant," Sloane said, "and I have a prenatal DNA test confirming that Graham W. Liff is the father. If his wife's child is illegitimate, then my child is the sole beneficiary of the W. Liff family trust." Graham went white. He stared at Sloane as if she had grown a second head. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. It was taking every ounce of my willpower not to laugh. Sloane thought she had checkmated me. She thought she was the new queen. She had no idea she had just admitted to a miracle or a lie. Graham knew he was sterile. He knew he had zero sperm count. He knew with absolute biological certainty that he could not be the father of Sloane's baby, which meant Sloane was lying or she was sleeping with someone else and trying to pin it on the billionaire. Graham stood up slowly. He looked at his mistress. The look on his face was not love. It was the cold, dead realization that the only person he trusted was also a shark. "Sloane," Graham whispered, "sit down." "No, Graham," she said, smiling at him. "We don't have to hide it anymore. We can be a family, the real family. This is a circus." Judge Vance barked, banging his gavel. "Order, MS." Carrion returned to the gallery or be held in contempt. Sloane sat down, looking smug. She thought she had won. Meyer looked at me. She gave a tiny nod. "Your Honor," Meyer said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Mr. Wycliffe has presented a dubious report from a private lab. MS. Carrion has presented a theory, but the court needs facts." Meyer pointed to the sealed envelope sitting on the judge's bench. It had been delivered by armed courier that morning. "We requested a chain of custody prenatal test," Meyer said, "performed by the court-appointed independent laboratory. The results are in that envelope on your bench. We ask that the court open it now and read the results into the record." Sterling stood up. "Your Honor, we object. We have not had time to review." Overruled. Judge Vance said, "This is an emergency hearing regarding the welfare and parentage of a child. I want the truth." The judge reached for the envelope. The room went deathly silent. Even the reporter stopped typing. In that breathless moment, Graham leaned over the aisle toward me. His face was pale, his eyes wide and manic. He looked like a cornered animal that decided to bite one last time. "You think you are clever?" he hissed, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "But you are going to lose. You will lose the child. You will lose your reputation. And when I am done with you, you will wish you had died in that hospital." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved for 7 years. I looked at the father of the child I carried, even if he wasn't the biological one, and I felt nothing. No fear, no love, just the cold clarity of the end. "Graham," I whispered back. I glanced at the envelope in the judge's hand, then back at his terrified eyes. "Are you sure?" Judge Vance stood up. He held the envelope high, the courtroom lights catching the red wax seal. He looked around the room, his gaze lingering on Graham, then on Sloane, and finally settling on me. He hooked his finger under the flap. The sound of the paper tearing was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. The sound of the envelope tearing was not loud, but in the silence of Courtroom 4, it sounded like a bone snapping. Judge Vance pulled out a single thick document. He adjusted his glasses. He did not look at the lawyers. He looked at the paper for a long time, his expression hardening with every line he read. Graham was leaning forward, his knuckles white on the table. He looked like a man betting his entire life on a single card turn. "I have reviewed the independent court-ordered DNA analysis," Judge Vance said. His voice was devoid of emotion. It was the voice of the law. "The results are definitive." He looked at Graham. "First, regarding the paternity of the unborn child carried by the respondent, Elise Wycliffe, the probability of paternity for Graham W. Liff is 0%. Graham let out a sharp breath. He looked at his lawyer, Sterling, and nodded. He thought he had won. He thought this proved I was a cheater. He turned to me, his smile returning, cold and triumphant. "See," his eyes said, "you are nothing." However, the judge continued, his voice rising over the murmur in the gallery. "The laboratory conducted a secondary familial match as requested by the defense, comparing the fetal DNA against the known profile of Victor W. Liff." Graham's smile froze. "The probability that the unborn child is the biological son of Victor Wycliffe is 99.9%. The courtroom did not just gasp, it exploded. Reporters jumped to their feet. Sterling dropped his pen. Sloane Carrion covered her mouth, her eyes widening in genuine shock. Graham sat paralyzed. He looked at the judge, then at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The narrative he had built, the cheating wife, the tragic husband, had just been incinerated. The baby was not a bastard. The baby was his brother. Order! Judge Vance shouted, banging his gavel with enough force to shake the bench. Order in this court. I am not finished. The room fell into a terrified silence. The judge was shaking the paper in his hand. This report includes a forensic audit of the document previously submitted by the petitioner, the judge said, glaring at Graham. The Genshaw report entered into evidence by Mr. Wycliffe has been flagged. The digital signature does not match the laboratory registry. The timestamps indicate the file was created 3 weeks prior to sample collection, and the chain of custody breaks at the exact moment the sample was handled by Mr. W. Cliffe's personal assistant. Judge Vance lowered the paper, his eyes dark with fury. Mr. W. Cliffe, you did not just submit false evidence. You forged a medical document to defraud this court and slander your wife. That is a lie, Graham shouted, standing up. She tricked me. She seduces my father. Sit down, the judge roared. I said, I am not finished. Judge Vance picked up a second sheet of paper from the envelope. This was the one I had been waiting for. This was the kill shot. The independent lab ran one final test, the judge said, to resolve the genetic anomaly of the sibling match. They compared the DNA of the petitioner Graham Wycliffe against the DNA of Victor Wycliffe. Graham went still. He knew deep down, he had always known. The results show 0 genetic markers shared between Graham W. Liff and Victor Wycliffe. The judge read, there is no biological relationship. Graham W. Liff is not the son of Victor W. Liff. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and suffocating. Graham W. Cliffe was not an heir. He was a cuckoo in the nest. The heir clause of the W. Cliffe Trust, the very weapon he had tried to use against me, had just swung back and decapitated his entire claim to the family fortune. This implies, the judge said, his voice dripping with disdain, that the only biological heir to the W. Cliffe estate is the unborn child currently carried by Mrs. Elise Wycliffe. I looked at Graham. His face was the color of ash. The power, the arrogance, the billionaire aura, it all evaporated. He was just a man in a suit who had lost everything. Furthermore, the judge said, picking up the facts that had just been handed to him by the clerk, I have received the subpoenaed records from the North Quill Fertility Institute. They show a clear pattern of sample tampering. The signature authorizing the use of the Wycliffe genetic material appears to be a forgery. This is not just a civil matter. Mr. Sterling, this is medical fraud. This is non-consensual extraction. This is a criminal enterprise. Judge Vance turned his gaze to the front row. Ms. Carrion, he said. Sloane flinched. She looked like she wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't work. You filed a motion claiming to carry Mr. Wycliffe's heir. The judge said, since Mr. Wycliffe has been proven not to be an heir himself, your claim to the trust is void. However, given the allegations of fraud in this room, I am ordering an immediate court-monitored DNA test for your pregnancy as well. If we find that you have falsified your claim or if you are complicit in this scheme, you will be facing the same charges. Sloane burst into tears. She knew the game was up. She looked at Graham with pure hatred, realizing she had bet on a horse that was not even in the race. Stand up, Mr. W. Cliffe, the judge ordered. Graham stood. He was shaking. The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice. Judge Vance ruled, I am granting full legal and physical custody of the unborn child to Elise Wycliffe. I am issuing a permanent restraining order against Graham W. Liff. You are to have no contact with the respondent or the child. The judge looked at the baifs. I am also referring this entire file, including the forged DNA report and the IVF records, to the district attorney's office for immediate investigation into perjury, fraud, and evidence tampering. Baifs take Mr. Wycliffe into custody. 2 officers moved toward the table. Graham snapped. It happened in a blur. The realization that his life was over the money, the reputation, the freedom broke something inside him. He let out a guttural roar and lunged across the aisle. You bitch. He screamed, his face twisted into a mask of pure madness. You ruined it. You ruined everything. He reached for me. Noah and Reed were up instantly blocking me, but they didn't need to. The Baifs were faster. They tackled Graham to the floor before he got within 5 st of me. Get off me! Graham screamed, thrashing against the marble floor. I am an Ikloth. I own this city. You cannot touch me. I stood up slowly. I placed my hand on my belly. My son kicked a strong, powerful thump against my palm. He was safe. I looked down at the man on the floor. His suit was torn. His hair was wild. He looked small. He looked pathetic. You are now Wycliffe? Graham, I said softly. The room was so quiet that everyone heard me. And you never owned me. The Baifs hauled him up. They pulled his arms behind his back. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs echoed through the courtroom. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Elise, Graham shouted as they dragged him toward the side door. Elise, wait. We can fix this. Don't let them take me. I did not answer. I turned my back on him. MS. Dillian, I said to Meyer. Are we done? Meyer smiled, closing her briefcase. We are done. I walked down the center aisle of the courtroom. The reporters parted like the Red Sea. They didn't shout questions anymore. They looked at me with something resembling awe. I pushed open the heavy brass doors and stepped out into the sunlight. It was blindingly bright. The air smelled of rain and exhaust and freedom. Behind me, the heavy doors swung shut, sealing the courtroom. I could still hear the faint sounds of Graham shouting, but they were fading, getting smaller and smaller until they were gone completely. I walked down the courthouse steps. I did not look back. I had a son to meet. I had an empire to clean up, and for the first time in 7 years, the story belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Azad Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop a comment below with your city or country so we can see how far our community reaches. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories.